Looking back on our history, our living story, gives us the opportunity to notice what has changed and what remains the same. It invites us to look closely at who we are and how our faith and traditions shape us. It reminds us to tell the stories of our community and our faith, to share what we've learned from mistakes and failure, as well as celebrating successes.
I grew up in Sandwich, and I didn't come to Marston's Mills until September of 1947, right after I married this tall, handsome, blue-eyed young man from Marston's Mills. And we were still on the second week of our honeymoon when along came, walking down the street, Lena Childs and Marjorie Hamlin. Now Marjorie played the organ at the church, and Lena was in the choir. So they stopped, and Wilbur introduced me to them. And before I was off of my honeymoon even, I was invited to join the choir. I think it was at one of the annual meetings when the district superintendent was down, and we were having our annual meeting. All the reports were coming in from various committees, and he then told us what a hard time he was having trying to find somebody who would, some fellow who would be a minister at the church. There just weren't enough to go around. And he, at that point, didn't know who he was going to appoint for the new church year and all. And I can remember it was Irene Hadfield who said to him, well, why can't we go over to Osterville? So she was the one that planted the seed for the merger with Osterville. And we all decided, well, something to look into at least, because the minister at Osterville was our minister also for a long time.
And my earliest memories there is the fairs that they used to have on that lawn and where everybody attended. They were, of course, I was a very young child at that time, but they were very pronounced in my memory, and seeing it and just a picture of it, it's almost like a Saturday Evening Post picture.
I remember I was on Osterville was in the process of planning for a new church building at that point, and I remembered several people from Marston's Mills got put on that committee, and when that was finally accomplished and the new church was built there and getting ready to open it, that's when we had the parade. One Sunday morning, we started the service in the old church, and then we moved in a parade down to the new church.
I was born in Osterville and was baptized in the Methodist Church when it was down on Main Street. It's a building that was over 100 years old then, and we eventually moved in 1970 to this building, which was built, and I started in 1969. I was 12 years old, and I was fortunate enough, I carried the American flag from the old church. We all marched up here on a Sunday. I carried the American flag up from the old church to here.
And our three kids were all baptized here. So, you know, it's really been a very family thing.
Been part of our lives.
To us.
I'd say it's been part of our lives.
Yeah, yeah.
All of our married life and your whole life, basically.
Children's activities were based around the church quite often. And youth fellowship was a very big thing. You know, when you were a teenager, you wanted to be in youth fellowship because they took cool trips. You know, you'd go to Mount Monadnock and climb it, or you'd go to Provincetown and climb the monument.
We actually turned a chapel, we had to turn a chapel downstairs into another Sunday school room. We had so many children.
And that peaked, as you'll read in history, in mid-2000, 2005, I think, or so. The highest membership historically ever, and the highest Sunday school attendance ever.
And because we had parents whose children were gay, and they wanted to keep it a secret. They didn't want to tell anybody, because sort of early on those days, it was not a good thing to be gay. People thought, oh yeah, the church is going to throw you out, they don't want you. And so this all grew to be through these small groups over a couple of years, I think, and then coming together and understanding. The Council of Churches, that ecumenical group on the Cape, had some of its beginnings in those years, although it had started. Every year it seemed to grow bigger and bigger. More churches were joining it.
I guess I found out what faith is all about in South Carolina, because those people had nothing but faith to hope. They were hoping that somebody like our team would come along and get their house fixed up.
There was a tiny, tiny village called Pachica, and there was an small agricultural school there. And our jobs were to, well, our first job was to dig a cesspool in the hard pan of the high desert.
It was so packed, actually you couldn't dig, you drilled. You had to drill the hole. I think the best thing we did probably was just bonding with the kids there. They were so wonderful and appreciative, and they were talented. All of them could play a musical instrument because they didn't have any entertainment other than that. They made their own entertainment.
Even to the point, if I may, of after every meal, and we would eat in the same big room that they were eating in, but we had our own couple of tables up to the side. They would sing their grace. And the first time we heard it, it was so pretty.
Yeah.
That was in 2001, and we still sing it or recite it at home with every meal.
I reconstructed the stained glass window that's in the church. Working with stained glass has been a hobby for years, but 947 pieces of glass in that window.
One of the things that I am extremely proud of is that our church has raised enough funds to be able to put solar panels on the roof and to try to bring home the greenhouse gases, the global warming, and to try to be partners with God in that respect.
I just feel like I need to mention my grandmother. In one of the older books that we have over here, she's listed, her mother was one of the early members, one of the charter members, so to speak, of the church. Her name was Nora Pierce. She married Lorenzo Gifford, so she was Nora Pierce Gifford. And she was an amazing woman, my grandmother. She raised 11 children, all close to that church in Marston's Mills, and she and Grandpa had a large farm. And speaking of outreach, a certain amount of the milk and the hams they cured and the herring that they cured in the springtime and their vegetables, a certain amount of all of that went to my grandparents' neighbors that they knew needed help. So that, I think without us even knowing it, that really taught us about outreach.
We provide people a way to hook in to serving our neighbor, and maybe a way that we don't know how to do it anymore, that we don't know how to do it in the same way we used to, because our work schedules are different. We are so busy, crazy busy, and so we may not know our neighbors, and we certainly don't know what they need. We've had a backpack drive, and a family with kind of a tangential connection to our church was able to say that they needed backpacks through our preschool, which came to us, and we could meet that need and fill those backpacks with school supplies as well as food. So meeting multiple needs that my guess is no one in the pews would have any reason to know about. So I think that's something that we really do offer the community, and a way that maybe outreach has changed. It's less direct, but no less impactful. I think we also offer a wide variety of ways for people to give, far beyond themselves. So they can give time, talent, treasure. We even turn stuff into ministry, like through a Rainbow's End. I think we are a group of people committed to bearing witness to the love of God in this world and what it looks like to try to love Jesus and be like Jesus day by day. And I don't think that's changed in 200 years. Maybe the specific ways we go about it. It's part of our mission statement, together in Christ, committed to serve. And I think since the very beginning, we have been learning about God through small groups and Bible studies and serving in the community. And that may have changed some in how we do it in 200 years. But I think the idea behind it, to love God and love neighbor, has remained the same for 200 years.
Although there are very few people in the church community now that were here when I was a child, or in the Marston's Mills Church when I was a child, it's still my home church, and I just feel loved, I feel safe, I feel happy, and in the crazy world that we live in, this is a lovely place to be.
And I love the people. Whether I know them or not, I look upon them as my friends, you know, and they'll always be that way.
It's here. It's a place to come to for many needs, both social and spiritual.
I think a church can always move forward with more Methodists, more lay people. I think that's the way John Wesley, why and the way he built the church, with the lay people taking part and being the leaders. And I think the more lay people, you know, encouraging them. And I think that happens today, because we're not in a church order that says, no, no, don't touch. I mean, we like wonderful ideas and committees that decide on certain things, like a democratic decision of the group. And that was what happened with the reconciling congregation, I believe. If people didn't want it, they would have said, no, we won't do it. But they didn't, they said yes. And I mean, I can see some of those small groups meeting and wondering, what are we going to talk about tonight? And now it just seems like it's old history, isn't it? It's old history.
You know, looking back in hindsight, we can see how all these decisions have turned out. But every time this church took a risk, woke up in the morning, they had no idea what was coming that day. And that hasn't changed. In 200 years, we don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. And our denomination is in a time of great uncertainty and change and possibility. Amazing things could happen. God could be growing something entirely new that we might be a part of. And just like 200 years ago, we don't know what tomorrow will bring. But 200 years ago and today, we know that God is with us, has always been and will always be. So we may not know what's next, but we know that God will be with us and God will lead us into this joyous, uncertain future.
Am I supposed to be looking at you or this?
You can look wherever you want. Yep, that's fine.
I belong.
Awesome. Awesome. I feel so pumped right now.
Yeah, it's
Who's in the kitchen? Shh.
Oh, I don't know whether I should tell that one or not.
Oh, it sounds like you should.